Hello, everybody, and welcome to another new slash kind of related to a different series sort of thing we're going to be starting up on the channel. So basically, the idea is we're going to be taking a look at a different list that either myself or Reed or just kind of in general seems to be floating around in the community, but mostly ones that myself or Reed are using in tournaments. We're going to be breaking it down why all of the characters, tactics, and things like that are in that list, and talking about kind of some of the ways it could be tweaked, what the goal of the list is, why everything does the thing that it does in there, and just kind of what the thought process is while building that list or while playing those models. And just kind of going into as much detail as we can about, why the decisions made are the decisions that are made. Um, this is kind of being spouted from the character spotlight series where I had a comment that was asking basically, could you go into a little bit more depth about the list that you play so that way I could understand the video here talking about, I think it was specifically Luke Cage, in a little bit more context. And, that makes sense because at the end of the day, when I make those character spotlight videos, I want to try and be as generic as possible, but I am speaking from my own experiences. So, in this case, Luke Cage, I mentioned a lot in that video that I run him in my own Avengers list and the role that he fills there. So I guess it would make sense that having a video where I kind of talk about my kind of main competitive Avengers list would be a decent idea. So I am going to preface this video by saying this is just the list that I run. I'm not trying to say that it is the best Avengers list in the world. As a matter of fact, I'm quite certain that it is not. However, I've had a lot of success with this list. It's worked very well for me, and it's been through a lot of changes over the last year now that I've been playing this game. So obviously, it's not going to be the same. I might kind of revisit these lists every, few months or something like that if I've been going to a lot of events and making major changes, just to kind of come back and look at it again and say, like, okay, these are the changes I've made since the last update and talk about those, that sort of thing. I already kind of do that when I do the tournament recaps, but I might start doing it with these as well if this is going to be something that people are interested in watching and kind of following what lists myself read. And again, we might occasionally touch on some other ones that are just big in the community. I mean, recently we uploaded a video with X-Men Red and iDog in it, and those are both lists that are really big in the community, but Reed and I haven't really personally tried much aside from that video, and that of course being X-Men with Red Skull and iDog as Midnight Suns with Immortal Hulk and Lockjaw. So yeah, we're gonna kind of start out though by talking about our own list. So today I'm starting talking about the Avengers, and then some point in the next couple weeks probably I'll try and get Reed on and we'll talk about his X-Men list and go down all of the decisions and stuff in there and why he's doing the things that he's doing. But today we're gonna start out with Avengers because that is what I play, and it's just me here today for this video. So without further ado, I think I have rambled on long enough about what the point of this video is gonna be. We're gonna get right into it, and I guess we'll just start by kind of talking about what the overall list is supposed to be. So it is an Avengers list, obviously, and as you can see, I'm running two leaders, so I have original Steve Rogers here from the core box, and I also have Captain Sam here. And I'll get into why I'm running both of them later. For the longest time, this list was just a Steve Rogers list. Sam's actually a relatively recent addition. I only added him maybe a couple months ago now. So he fills a very specific role in this list, and there's a reason why he's here. But he does get run as the leader. But the kind of point of this list, and it didn't always start out this way, but originally it was kind of designed as a bit of a bodyguard brick list. It was focused very heavily around Steve, Mr. Luke Cage here, and then I used to also run Venom in the list, so I would also have Lethal Protector going on. And the idea of the list back then was it was kind of just a, I'm going to decide who you're going to punch, not you. That's how this is going to play. But over time, I started to move a little bit away from that playstyle. I still play very bodyguard heavy. Luke Cage makes almost every single list. There's very few games where he stays behind. And of course, Steve Rogers is the main leader for this list. I do occasionally run Sam, and we'll talk about that situation, but Steve is still the main leader, and he, of course, is a bodyguard himself. So it still kind of has some of that core, and I do run the Heroes for Hire tactics card, and I have Iron Fist as well for a little bit of flexibility on that too. So it still has that central idea of I'm gonna, during key moments of the game, I'm gonna decide who you're going to punch, not you, but it's kind of moved away from being entirely about that to being a bit of a Hulk delivery system. So when I started playing this list a while back, there was no Hulk in the original version of the list. He was a model that I picked up, maybe half a year ago now. Um, and of course, for anyone who plays competitive Marvel Crisis Protocol, they know that Hulk is very, very powerful into the meta. Some people argue that he is possibly the strongest model in the game right now. And he's definitely up there. I don't know if I would personally call him the strongest, but I'm not going to get into that debate here. But he is incredibly powerful. He brings a lot to the Avengers. He's probably one of the best control pieces in the game, right up there with Thanos for that. He also plays a really, really good attrition game. I mean, he's squishier than he looks, only 20 health, and his best defensive ability costs him a whopping 4 power, but it's still 20 health and he doesn't flip over, so it's kind of hard to kill an activation on Hulk, short of just killing Hulk. And then he has really solid offensive abilities. I mean, even if he hasn't taken any damage, he's throwing out 7 dice builder attacks. He's got a beam, which if you can give him some hammers or get him going with his damage, that beam hits like an absolute truck. I've thrown out some 9 dice beams before and done some really rude things with those. And then of course Hulk Smash getting the stagger and the throw. The wild is sometimes a little problematic with those, but again, he's just such a fantastic attrition piece when you need him to be. Meanwhile, having a 2 cost character throw size 4 throwing medium, fantastic, just an absurdly good control ability. And if you need to pivot that into attrition, it can also be a size 4 terrain throw. So whatever you're kind of feeling, plus the fact that the Strike and Hulk Smash both have control things on wilds as well. There's just a lot of really hard control that this model can bring to the table. So the point of this list, as soon as he went in, kind of became okay. So Hulk is really, really good at kind of saying like this objective is my objective. Hulk is going to activate last in the turn, and he's going to say this objective is mine. Everyone else can get out of here. He might take a model down in the process as well because he is casually throwing, as long as he wasn't staggered or had to waste a move to get into position, he's casually throwing 14 dice on most of his activations. And because of his fantastic movement abilities with things like Gamma Leap or Avengers Assemble and Avengers, usually has no problem, even if he has been controlled a little bit, getting back into the fight. So he still gets to double tap. This model is honestly a bit of a monster on low secure count. Secures, I guess, is the best way of saying that. So the big thing with this becomes now, instead of being a you're gonna punch who I want you to punch, it's now you're going to punch Hulk because you need to deal with Hulk in this list, and I have a lot of anti-control stuff to stop you from just throwing him away. And when you get Hulk to a point where I'm starting to get worried he might actually go down, usually around that 12 health threshold, then I have models like Luke Cage or Captain America start taking the hits for him. And of course, I'm also doing that to avoid things like staggers, or if there's other conditions I really don't want. Like a lot of the times, I'll dodge and incinerate with Captain America or Cage. Not that they particularly love having an incinerate, but I certainly prefer it over Hulk having it, so that's usually worth doing. But yeah, that's kind of the core of the list. Not to say that I bring it literally every game, but many, many games it's going to be Steve and Hulk bringing up 10 threat, and then Luke Cage for 13, and then I kind of go from there. So, kind of going into that, the idea behind some of the other models, and Iron Fist is actually a newer addition, so we'll talk about him later. They're in no particular order here. We have Iron Man. Iron Man, I think, is just an exceptionally good 3 threat under Steve. He plays into that control game that this list wants to be playing. because, like I said, Hulk being such a really strong control piece, Iron Man kind of plays into that as well. He's got a push, and any size push on his builder, which can be really nice sometimes. If I'm planning on getting rid of a model, I can throw it away with Hulk. Notably, if it's already activated, I don't tend to try to throw models that I've already activated, but I can throw it with Hulk, and then I can have Iron Man kind of move up and repulsor it a couple times, and hopefully push it back even further, because that can really screw over a model. Sometimes they'll have, maybe it's another Hulk or something, and it'll have its own Gamma Leap to kind of mitigate the first one. But if you can do it again, if you can tap it twice, that's usually worth doing. So Iron Man plays really well into that. Under Steve, Friday AI the first time only costs one, which means he gets to do it every turn. And then if he builds a half decent amount of power off the six dice attack, then he gets to do it again, which is just fantastic. Iron Man also allows me to bring in Helios Laser, which is a really good way of just dealing with pesky models. I find it's pretty rare that I'm actually using this to target out battleship models. Mind you, I haven't had a crazy amount of reps into things like Malekiths, and maybe I would use it more often against Malekith, but in terms of enemy Hulks or immortal Hulks or things like that, I find I typically don't use it towards them. A lot of the times I'm aiming my Helios laser towards something like a Beta Ray Bill or even a Psylocke. Models that can deal with my Guardians, like my Captain America and my Luke Cage, very easily, or models that can control Hulk, because anything that's throwing Hulk away needs to be stopped. So Helios is a really good solution to that, and Iron Man kind of allows me to throw that into the list. Next, I have Spider Woman here. Spider Woman's also a relatively recent addition to the list. I added her shortly after she was released, but she's unfortunately a model that doesn't see the table very often in this list. I might end up swapping her out soon. We're not 100% sure on that right now. She does provide a objective drop that nobody else in the list currently has, and that is really, really useful. She's also, of course, long mover with a range 2 place. She can be relatively bulky between stealth and martial artist. Like, she's got a lot of good things going on for her. Unfortunately, she doesn't really play to the tune of the list. She's more of a very specific tech piece for when I feel like I'm going to need objective drops. If I'm going against a kind of objective and runaway heavy team, something like a Web Warriors or something like that, I think she might see a little bit more play. I just unfortunately haven't really had that situation come up all that much. So it's kind of hard to gauge her actual value to this list since she hasn't been played all that much, but I do think she's a solid piece in Avengers, and she definitely likes I don't fly, I glide under Steve. Being something she can do for one is really, really nice. So yeah, she doesn't really fit into the game plan, but I do think she's a solid model there nonetheless, and unfortunately she is kind of on the chopping block for the list. Next up we have Wong, and Wong is actually a really, really important piece for this list. He does a couple really important things. So the first thing that he does is he is my way of removing staggers or incinerates or other nasty conditions off of Hulk. When Hulk starts to get those conditions, unfortunately, one thing Avengers really lacks is condition removal, and Wong is really, really good for that. I like to sit Wong on a back point. A lot of the times, this list is trying to play things like Gamma or Researcher. I mean, Researcher, it's not really a back point, but um, Gamma, Demons, and I'm mostly just those two. On occasion, I'll throw them on a back point in like Infinity Formula or something as well. But he's really, really good for sitting on a back point, being just within range three of. Usually, I like to keep him within range of Steve and Hulk if I can, because he can peel conditions off of Hulk and he can heal up Steve. And on Steve's flip side, being able to heal him up is just annoying. It's really, really rude. So super, super useful for that sort of thing. And of course, he's very efficient under Steve as well. Faithful Assistant for one power on the first turn is quite nice, so you don't actually have to meditate. Meaning, if you need to double move him to get him onto a point, because I have brought him on the intrusions and stuff like that before, where all the points are kind of on the middle of the board. I'm totally willing to do a faithful assistant and then double walk him over to one of the side points or something like that. And he probably dies for that realistically. Wong is not the bulkiest lad in the world, but It is kind of something that my opponent's forced to deal with because now he is a healthy model contesting a point. So that's something that I like to do with him fairly often, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. In addition, he kind of replaces advanced R&D in this list, allows me to open up that extra restricted slot. Being a two threat, he's not really hard to slot in. As I mentioned, I kind of have a bit of a 13 threat core, so at 15 threat, which happens to be a couple of the scenarios this list likes, Wong fits in very, very nicely as that final model. He provides very useful support, like I said, healing Captain America, healing Luke Cage, and peeling conditions off of Hulk. So he usually feels like he's earning his value. And then that kind of faithful assistant to help me get that little extra power when I need it. A lot of the times in Under Steve, you don't need that extra power. A lot of characters can kind of do what they're doing without it. But Hulk definitely appreciates it once in a while. It can kind of guarantee that you can do both a throw and a jump, even if your attack goes south. So things like turn one, being able to gamma leap up the board for two, and then you probably still have to walk once to actually get within punching range of a middle objective. But then if you punch something and you whiff, you can still throw something, so you can still throw the enemy model off of the point to kind of increase your chances of controlling that point significantly. So that can be really, really good. It allows you to basically ignore the dice on Hulk a little bit because he can be very dicey, and Wong is just great for that. Defensively and offensively, he doesn't actually provide anything. He's very, very squishy, and his best attack is a four dice gainer. Um, Nothing really to talk about there, but he has a very important place in this list, which actually ties into this next model here, Beta Ray. When I do run the Sam leadership, Beta Ray really appreciates that extra power from Wong being able to do immeasurable strength turn one. But let's talk about why he's in the list real quick. So Beta Ray is basically budget Hulk. He does a lot of the same things Hulk does in this list, which is notably having a size 4 character throw. There's actually not much more to it than that. Beta Ray is a stupidly bulky model with a size 4 character throw, and because of that, he makes pretty much any list these days. In my opinion, he's never a bad option. He's a really, really powerful piece, and if I'm feeling like the sixth threat of Hulk is going to drag me down a little bit, if I need to go a little bit wider, Beta Ray is a really, really good alternative to Hulk. He's going to be under Steve, he's able to immeasurable strength turn one, so he can double move and throw someone away, which is really all I could ask for from Hulk as well. Although, like I said, usually I try to get at least one punch in with Hulk as well. But for two threat less, I think that's a worthwhile trade-off. With Honor Bound, he can be pretty hard to remove from a point. You need out of attack throws and things like that to get him off of a point, which to be fair, he's only size 2, so there's a fair number of those going around. But that's okay. He doesn't really mind walking back on. With a medium move, medium base, it's pretty hard to like permanently move him off of a point more, so it's more than just a single walk away. He has God Hunter, so he's really good at dealing with other battleships, things like other Hulks, other, Immortal Hulks, Malekiths, those sort of models. Really, really good at kind of just punching those and putting out good damage on those if I need to, or, having better odds to get the hurl trigger for an extra throw. And it is a medium throw on an attack, which is really, really nice, and only a 3 power attack at that, too. So, between that and Blessed by the Allfather, pretty good for that sort of situation. He's immune to Incinerate, which is really, really useful as well, because like I mentioned, this list does like demons for the most part, but sometimes demons can be a little bit of a sore spot for Hulk, because it does mean he goes down really, really fast, but Beta Ray kind of helps with that, and I've actually run the situation where I've run both Beta Ray and Hulk on demons before, and it can be pretty rude. Just the sheer amount of control that you have access to with those two on a map with so few secures basically means you're always getting the middle point, and that's kind of what this list is all about, is making sure you're always getting the middle point. So it's really, really good for that. I think Beta Ray has a very solid place in this list. Last for the models is Thor, Prince of Asgard. And Thor is actually a very recent addition to this list. He's come in and out of this list a few times, and if I'm being completely honest, he's probably going to end up coming out again. I've considered swapping him out for something like Voodoo recently, because Voodoo's been doing pretty well and would fill a mystic hole in this list. But Hulk Thor does a couple things. He's another kind of budget Hulk. Unfortunately, I think Beta Ray is a better budget Hulk than Thor is, but he kind of fills a similar role where under Steve and or with Wong, he can do Strongest Avenger turn one and then do a size 4 character throw. Under Steve, he could instead do a 4 Asgard, which gives him that charge into a 6 dice attack, where if he gets the wild, he's getting a character throw it on that as well. So being able to kind of do that turn one is pretty nice, and then obviously throwing out the stagger as well. In theory, really, really good. The hammer throw I actually like quite a lot as well, being able to throw out shocks. My list doesn't do a huge amount of conditions. Spider-Woman, again, I don't run super often, and Hulk can throw out some staggers on occasion, and I guess technically so can Cage. But for the most part, not a crazy amount of conditions being thrown out here. So having kind of shock on a range 5 stick is really, really nice, and it's something that technically Thor can do twice in a turn if he wants to. Overall, I actually think Thor gets a lot of undeserved hate. He's a pretty solid model, especially if you're running him under Steve's leadership. I think between 4 Asgard and Strongest Avenger, both only costing 2, depending which one you use first. Um, he's got a lot of play. His biggest issue is that he's a little squishy, but this list does have the tools to help keep him alive between, as I've already mentioned, Wong, Luke Cage, and Captain America kind of being in this list to deliver one model, which typically is going to be Hulk. But if I'm running Thor, I'm probably not running Hulk because, like I said, Thor is kind of filling the role of budget Hulk in this list in a way. Not as much of a budget as Beta Ray Bill, but also, filling a very similar role and a model that I could see myself running with Beta Ray Bill. And of course, at that point, we're halfway to a Guardians Asgardian list. Um, Going back up to the ones we kind of skipped over. So Captain Sam was a relatively recent addition to the list, and the reason why I added him in was because I came into a scenario where I was stuck on a B map. I think it was Infinity Formula. I think it was a BD. I think it was Hammer's Infinity Formula, and my opponent was playing a battleship. He was playing Immortal Hulk, and I realized that without the support network that I can put on Hulk, there's very much a world where Hulk just kind of dies when I have to be split up like that, when I can't just put everything together and kind of murder ball my way down the middle. There is very much a world where Hulk dies, and unfortunately, that isn't great for me. I find between Hulk and Immortal Hulk, more often than not, if it comes down to one of them is punching the other one, Immortal Hulk is probably winning that fight, and it didn't help that my opponent's list had a lot of good ways of kind of mitigating my control and having all sorts of fancy movement shenanigans to kind of get the alpha strike on my Hulk as well. So I realized that I needed something to help me go a little bit wider and not necessarily play without Hulk, but play a little less around Hulk. And that was kind of where Sam came in. I'd been sitting on the model for a while and wanting to play it, but I just hadn't gotten around to it. And I was kind of like, you know what? This could be my solution to this particular problem. So I tried it, and I do run Hulk under Sam usually, but because of the way Sam's leadership works and because he's only a 3 threat leader, I can afford to go a little bit wider with that list. I can run kind of Sam, Hulk, and then a bunch of 3 threats basically to kind of go as wide as humanly possible. So that way, when Hulk does get taken down, I have all these other models that can move in. They can move on to points, and they can keep scoring me, and they can kind of almost have Hulk be a bit of a distraction piece. He's not actually the core of the list anymore. He's just there to draw your attention away while Sam and the other 3 threats are scoring me points and actually doing things that matter. So Sam fills a very specific role. He allows me to go not quite Sam spam because I do still run Hulk most of the time in that list. But if I do want to go towards the spammier side, I can run him with Beta Ray, and then I can use Wong to make sure I'm still getting those early turn throws and things like that. And I think he works really, really well in that scenario as well. Also, Sam is just an amazing model. I've run him under Steve a couple times now, and he feels so good. I mean, being able to charge for one on a long move with a range 4 throw is just fantastic. The shield throw only being 4 dice, yeah, it doesn't typically do all that much in terms of damage, but when it does, it's getting character pushes, which again is playing into the control game that this list is trying to play. Wild Ricochet is always useful. I mean, it doesn't come up a crazy amount on a four dicer, but being able to gain the extra power off of that or potentially get double control is just huge. Having a size 3 throw on what Red Wing Assault is really nice as well. Just in general, Sam is an amazing model. I love this model to bits. And yeah, I mean, I didn't mention it there, but Airlift as well can be super useful for getting models like Beta Ray, or even if I was running Thor instead of Hulk, I could Airlift Thor forward and then have Thor charge, and he'd be able to probably get to a lot of things within one move. I haven't measured it out yet, but it would be interesting to see how that would work. And under Steve, Airlift costs 1, so you can do it turn 1. Sam is just such a good model. And then that leads me into Iron Fist. I took Iron Fist out of the list a long, long time ago because he doesn't actually get any benefit from Steve's leadership. He doesn't have a single superpower on his card that actually costs power. So having Steve Rogers with him kind of was pointless. Not that Iron Fist was necessarily bad under Steve, it was just he didn't get anything better, right? So I wanted to kind of take more advantage of Steve's leadership, but once I started running Sam, I was like, okay, you know what? Actually, if I want to be able to go wider, if I want to be able to spam out 3 threats, then Iron Fist works really well for that. I think Iron Fist is a model that is a scary piece. You cannot leave him alone. And I think because of that, he fills a very valuable role in that list where I usually like to run him up beside Cage, actually, even though it means I'm not spreading out the heroes for hire as much. I like Cage being there to kind of force my opponent to think about how to deal with these models, because Cage can kind of keep Iron Fist alive when the Iron Fist is ready to go, which is pretty big. um and then, yeah, he fits the bill for what Sam likes as well. I mean, he's got Master Martial Artist, so he can be relatively hard to take down if you're attacking him within 3, which, let's be real, most of the attacks in the game are within 3. Um, so he can be a little bit on the bulkier side there. He has only 3 dice and 5 health, so it's a little dicey there, but it can be enough, and that fits the bill for Sam with the healing and stuff. He'll get some added value to that. It's in a similar way to what Steve Rogers is doing. And like I said, the Iron Fist is just such a threat that your opponent has to deal with. I think he's a very valuable addition to the Sam side of the list. So that is all of the characters in the list. I guess we'll move on to the tactics cards. So starting out, Avengers Assemble is a bit of a no-brainer with Avengers. I think this card always has to be run with Avengers. It's so powerful. I mean, in my opinion, it's probably one of the best tactics cards in the game. Unfortunately, it's kind of the only tactics cards Avengers have that they like to consistently use. I did run around with Second Wind in the list for a while, but unfortunately, I've decided to cut it because I find the healing usually isn't super relevant. It's come up before, but it's not insane. And stun is a condition that, while it is very impactful when it is being thrown around, isn't really that big of a concern for my list. I mean, Steve Rogers doesn't actually care that much about it. His main power gain is with the shield throw, so he's usually only gaining 1 at a time anyways. Luke Cage, in a similar vein, his like he would like to be able to build more on his builder, but it is only a 5 dice builder, so I'm not usually expecting more than 1, maybe 2 at a time anyways. And then when it comes to taking damage on both of those models, they're both relatively bulky models. They have ways of either giving themselves extra dice or reducing damage or counting blanks. And I mean, that's true of a lot of the models in the list in general. So stun on them isn't super relevant because they're usually not taking more than a couple damage at a time unless there was a spike somewhere in there. So I find Second Wind is just a little unnecessary for them. Hulk is, of course, immune to stun, so that doesn't matter for him. And yeah, it just kind of it doesn't feel super important with this list. So I did unfortunately cut it. But Avengers Assemble, absolutely huge. It's necessary to this list, whether I'm using it to undo some control that's been done to me, maybe Hulk's been thrown and I really want to make sure he gets to double tap this turn, or even something like I'm not ready to activate with Steve Rogers, but Steve Rogers got thrown away from Hulk, so he can't bodyguard, so I need him back there. I've definitely used it for stuff like that. Or even if, my opponent had a lot of control going around, and a bunch of my models aren't on points by the end of the turn, or maybe I willingly put them off of points because I knew I had this card active. for my final activation of the round, a lot of the times I'll play Avengers Assemble to be like, okay, well, all of these guys who are off of points, they're now all on those points again. And it can be really, really big for stuff like that. So yeah, Avengers Assemble is fantastic for this list. Very, very important. I already mentioned Helios, and it's part of why Stark is in the list, so I'm not going to talk too much about that, but it is a fantastic card. Heroes for Hire, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist both love this card. Luke Cage, in my opinion, doesn't leave home without it. This card makes almost every list that I play. It's really, really good. It gives you an extra way of bodyguarding with Luke Cage, whereas he usually has the taunt. So you can do some fun stuff. I talked about this in the Luke Cage video, where you can use Heroes for Hire to get in range for the taunt. Also having the versatility of being able to use it off of Iron Fist. I mean, I was running the card before I put Iron Fist in the list, but it definitely doesn't hurt its value in this list. It's just a really, really good card. My restricted cards, I use Indomitable and Brace for Impact. So Indomitable is almost a must with Hulk. I mean, being able to stop control on Hulk is absolutely massive. He is very, very much a centerpiece to this list, and if he's not being able to use his full activation, then it's really bad. So Indomitable is great because I can stop him from being thrown away by something like a Beta Ray, or alternatively, if he's about to be thrown into someone like Captain America, who really doesn't appreciate having a size 4 thrown at him, I can end on that to also just keep Captain America standing, which is obviously huge because he's then going to bodyguard any attacks that are going into Hulk that I don't want Hulk eating. So Indom is critical to this list. Next, we have Brace for Impact. So Brace, I was tossed for a while between Brace and Patch Up, I think was the one I was running before. And that was just because it's Patch Up on models like Steve or like Luke Cage, where they have the reduction and they don't take damage very quickly, can be really, really aggravating for an opponent. And I think there's still an argument for Patch Up to be run in this list instead of Brace, but Brace is really valuable for that exact same reason before of after I've burned Indomitable, if they go to throw Hulk at Steve again, or they just have a size 4 piece of terrain that they want to throw at Steve, being able to brace that is pretty huge. While Steve does throw good dice against it, I mean, he is still throwing 4, which is nothing bad. That's a lot of damage that's coming Steve's way, and he definitely doesn't appreciate it since he can't count blanks and he can't do Vibranium Shield. So it's really, really important towards keeping him and a few other models alive, or just, that key moment where that one damage is what they need to kill you. And of course, Brace can be very clutch in those games. But yeah, overall, I don't think I think Brace was the right call over Patch Up for this list. So now we're going on to the more generics, and I do want to mention going into this that I'm actually very strongly considering switching out either Fallback or Warpath for no matter the cost, I think is what it is, the one that lets you take damage to boost your or not boost your attack, but basically take damage instead of spending power for your next attack. And the main reason for that being I've used it on Hulk on occasion to basically, be able to get my extra dice going faster or just be a little bit more power conservative. But largely why I want to run it is because on Iron Fist, it's an absolute menace of a card. It makes him such a threat, and I think it's really, really valuable there. There's a few other characters here and there that might occasionally use it, not to a crazy degree. I mean, I could see myself using it on Spider-Woman. I could see in the right scenario it even being used on Steve or Cage to try and get the throws going from their spender attacks, but it's a really valuable card, and I think it probably will be cutting out one of either Fallback or Warpath soon. Haven't quite decided which one yet. But we'll go into this now. So Eyes on the Prize is another new addition to the list. Eyes on the Prize recently made the cut because Beta Ray recently made the cut, and Beta Ray is one of the best Eyes on the Prize users in the game. So for those who don't know, medium base with a medium move can get within 2 of the center line objectives and can still be within range 1 of or I don't know if they can still be, but they can definitely move to be within range 1 of something like a B map, so like an Infinity Formula or something like that. and they could probably also, well, almost definitely also get to like a back point on a D map or something like that. So it's a really, really good way of giving some flexibility and some safe extract grabbing to well, one model. The downside to it is you need to have two power to play it, or one power to play it, and then one power to pick up the objective. So something like Beta Ray, it's really, really useful because he has two power. He fits the bill of being a medium-based medium mover. So he gets to play Eyes of the Prize and kind of turn one Gramna extract safely, and then still be in a position where he's not going to be punched or anything like that turn one if I don't want him to be. So in general, really, really good card for Beta Ray and helps this list, which is very, very secure focused. It helps them kind of stay up on the extract game. Next we have fallback. So this is kind of my anti-double tap mechanic because I have a lot of bulky models in the list. So models like Hulk or Cage or even Cap will occasionally want to use this card too. If there's an attack coming at me, I can play this because I know, maybe they're trying to build up towards a spender or something like that. Um, I can play this to back up and hopefully be out of range of their next attack and force them to either waste some power or just waste an action. In general, I think it's a really, really good card, but the situations where it comes up are they can be very specific, so it doesn't see a crazy amount of play in this list, mainly partially because the first slots are very competitive. I mean, a lot of the times my five cards are just these five cards from Avengers Assemble to brace for impact here. Obviously depends on exactly how the list was built and what threat we're playing at, because like Stark doesn't always make the cut, especially if it's a lower threat like 15. But a lot of the times it's just these five cards, so fallback doesn't seem to make the cut too often, but I do think it has a valuable place here. Next is Recalibration Matrix. Recal is really, really valuable for Hulk when you really need that wild stagger or something like that, or wild throw more often. Recal can be absolutely huge, and it can also help kind of mitigate um, if Hulk gets spiked or even Captain America gets spiked really hard. Being able to recal it and just be like, okay, no, I'm not ready for this model to leave the table because your 5 dice attack got you 7 hits. Let's try that again and see how it goes. So it's really, really useful. Again, unfortunately, the slots are really competitive, so I don't seem to play it all that often, but I think it is very, very valuable for models like Hulk or my kind of bulky bodyguards there. Next, we have Escort to Safety. Escort to Safety I find is pretty nice for this list because I usually do have a model hanging around the back, whether it's Iron Man or Wong typically. As one of the two, they can chill back a little bit. Usually, especially if it's Wong, they like to be within three of my allies anyways. And Wong also typically has a decent amount of power to spare, especially since his faithful assistant only costs one under Steve, so he's usually sitting on an okay amount of power, so he doesn't mind being the escort to safety here. So he's gonna be useful on occasion to rescue either Hulk or typically I try not to pull Steve with this ability if I can avoid it because um obviously pulling my bodyguard away from Hulk isn't usually a great option. And if the attack was going at Steve, that meant it was probably bodyguarded from Hulk. But again, it's another one of those cards that doesn't make the list all too often, but when it does, I think it's fairly valuable. And lastly, and probably the one I'm cutting honestly, is Warpath. It's nice because it's basically aggressive on a stick, so being able to give Hulk aggressive for a turn can be really, really nice if they're using, attack based shoves or throws to get him out of the way. Being able to push him back in can be very, very useful. I think in theory it's a very, very good card for the list, but unfortunately the situation where it's useful doesn't come up quite enough to warrant its inclusion. And because I have to kind of predict that I'm going to need it, just based off of their list, they could have one or two models where it would be very effective against them, but with no guarantee that it's gonna come up if they don't choose to table those models. It's a little bit of a risky choice. So unfortunately, I think this card will be getting cut in favor of no matter the cost, but is a very good card, and I do think it's solid for the list. Going next, we have the secures and the extracts for the list. So I've already kind of mentioned pretty much all of these at this point. But we'll start with the secures. So as I mentioned, the point of this list is kind of saying this point in particular is mine. You are not going to touch it. I'm going to have, three character throws or shoves and things like that right at the end of the round. So Gamma's really good. It also fits the points quite nicely because Steve, Hulk, Wong, and Luke Cage fit on Gamma. Or if I don't think I'm going to need Luke Cage, sometimes I'll swap him for Iron Man here. That can be a bit of a tech choice just depending on what I'm going up against, if I want a little bit more offensive or a little bit more defensive. Um, but in general, I think it's very, very good for my list with things like medium throws from Hulk as well. Being able to throw them not just off of the point, but also out of the gamma shelter for a little bit of extra damage here and there. Just really, really solid. And a lot of the times I can actually push towards their back point with this, especially if they're also playing a taller list and I'm able to kind of secure that second and keep them with the priority. I can kind of have Hulk push over to their back point and get everyone out of the way very, very effectively a lot of the time. So it's really good for that. Next, we have intrusions. I don't really know what it is about this, but I love this scenario. The 19 threat point value is relatively nice for this list. There's a few good lists that I can do at 19 threat. Um, Notably, it's I think Hulk, Steve, Cage, Wong, and then a fourth threat. So nowadays it would be Beta Ray Bill, but it used to be Rhino was what took that slot. Um, Gives me a lot of control, and I think that's really, really valuable on these maps because if I can stay on the point and keep my opponents off of the points, I have a lot of extra mobility through the portals, whereas my opponent needs to still move to get to them, which is really, really good. Yeah, just in general, I think 19 threat favors this list very nicely, and the low amount of secures is kind of what this list likes to play around, so it works pretty well. And of course, the extra mobility from the portals is really, really useful. I can have models kind of come and go as they need to, so I can have, Steve can doesn't necessarily have to start beside Hulk. Hulk can go off on his own for a bit, and then when I get worried, I can pull Steve back very, very quickly by using a portal if I need to. Same for Luke Cage for that matter. So it's really, really good for this list. I like it a lot. And next we have demons. Once again, the 19 threat, low secure count. That's kind of the name of the game with this list. Incinerate can be a little sketchy, which is part of why Wong is in this list and why I have models like Beta Ray Build to kind of help out with that. And like I said, that list I just mentioned where I'm running Beta Ray and Hulk on demons, I think is just kind of rude. It's very, very hard to keep models on a point when your opponent has two size 4 character throws. So just in general, I think Demons is really, really good for this list still. Although I have considered cutting it in favor of something like Infinity Formula for when I'm running Sam, but for now I think I'm sticking with Demons, and we'll see how much it bites me later with the incinerates on all my bulky models. So next, going into the extracts, we have Fear grips world as worthy terrorized cities. Now, being completely honest, I don't actually think this is all that good for my list. I mean, the 18 threat is fine, although it is probably worse than 19 threat in a lot of ways for my list building. But the extra damage that's going to be just kind of across the board for having these, plus the fact that when I'm holding them, I'm going to be paying extra for things like Avengers Assemble and things like that. It is a little bit of a sore spot. The main reason why I run this one is honestly because it's fun and because between Hulk being able to grab it without moving and still be able to Gamma Leap, move, and punch, and then now with models like Beta Ray, I can Eyes on the Prize, one of the side ones as well, so I can safe grab one of them. It gives me a little bit of extract play when my list typically doesn't have a crazy amount of that. So I do like it for that, but the main reason why I'm running it is just because I think it's fun and the Hulk is really really fun with hammers. But I do think there's an argument that it hurts my list more than it helps it, so I'm not 100% sure if it's actually the most competitive choice here. Next we have Montesi Formula. This one I like. Again, Eyes on the Prize will allow me to kind of safely grab the middle one. But more than that, I'm already trying to play a lot of E-maps like Gamma and Demons. I don't love having to split up my guys because I do like being able to kind of murder ball a little bit. So Montesi is good for that because if I'm already on an E-map, like, typically if I have the choice and they have a couple EMAPs and their secures, I'll let them have their secures and hope I get one of them. So in the event where I'm getting Montesi here, um, I can kind of stick to that murder ball. I don't have to have models split off to go grab extracts, and my list appreciates that a lot. So yeah, there's not really much logic to it other than that is it's an EMAP, and I don't think the Mystic Beam isn't great for my list, although it does give me coverage, which is nice, but it also hurts models like Steve and in a way models like Hulk a fair bit. But I think it being an EMAP kind of justifies that, so it's fine for that. Lastly, we have Research Station. Um, this scenario is absolutely stupid for my list. I mean, if I get Researcher Gamma, it's basically a dream come true. Um, Hulk will almost always score me the Researcher, and then the game plan from there is just to pull it back. Never push the Researcher forward with my list. It's always to keep it back. I don't mind slower scoring because I have the durability with my list to kind of stall out a game that I don't mind kind of just pushing this back towards my own back point. I don't want to quite put it there in case they do manage to take it from me, but keeping it close to my own back point and just playing that defensive bodyguard brick around something like a Hulk that's going to throw away all of their models at the end of its turn. So they have very few ways of actually like keeping more than one model contesting this at any given time. It's the perfect scenario for my list, and I think it's probably one of the best secures in the game for a list like mine. So I've the it being an extract is a little rude. It's part of why my list is able to work so well is because we have an extract in the game that's basically a secure. So, and of course the 15 threat, like I said, is quite nice. And if I do get that dream scenario of Research Gamma, it locked 15 threat, which is really nice because I know a lot of other lists have a harder time dealing with something like my bodyguard brick with only 15 threat to play with. So it can be really good for stuff like that. But that is the list. I think I've talked about all of the models now. I've talked about all the tactics, and I've talked about all of the crises. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. I know this video went a little bit long. I kind of had a feeling that was going to happen because I was going in depth not on just one character, but 10 plus tactics plus crises. So I tried not to spend too much time on any one of them. But this is the first video I've done for this series, so I'm sure I went a little overboard on certain points. But I hope you guys did enjoy it nonetheless. I hope this was at least mildly informative. Whether you're trying to get into competitive Avengers yourself, I hope there was some ideas you were able to take away from it, or maybe there's a player in your local meta who plays Avengers and you wanted to have some ideas into to some of the things that they might be trying to do. I don't know how close to the kind of meta my Avengers list is. I don't follow what's like typically good in the meta super closely. I follow what models are being played, but not necessarily what like lists are being run for affiliations or game plans. Personally, I always just preferred to kind of build on my own things as I pick them up. And I know there are a lot of meta choices in here. I mean, obviously, I mentioned right at the beginning that Hulk is considered one of the best models in the game right now. And then Luke Cage and Iron Man are also incredibly good. Beta Ray Bill is in here because he's incredibly good. Um, so there's a lot of meta choices in here, but I don't know if it's necessarily the same playstyle as a lot of meta lists. So I don't know how transferable this would be to your own local meta or anything like that. But it is something that I've seen a lot of success with here. And yeah, I think in general it's a solid list. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it for, major tournaments or stuff like that. I mean, it's what I would be bringing to a major tournament, but that's just because it's what I play and what I'm comfortable with. So obviously that's kind of just my own personal experience. But I hope this has been informative. I hope for those of you who were curious, this has been a good kind of insight into the sort of list that I play and things like that. If you want to see this list in action, there has been a couple battle reports with some older versions of the list on the channel with it. Notably, I think the first live stream on the channel was this list against, or an older version of this list against my roommate's X-Men. So That would be that would be a good one to check out if you want to actually see how it plays and see what it's kind of doing on the actual table. But otherwise, that is going to do it for this list overview. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please do drop a like down below. Subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. I do battle reports. I do videos like this where I talk about things from a more competitive standpoint. And I'm starting to get into Shatterpoint now too. So if you're a Shatterpoint fan, it's awesome. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoy. And until next time, peace.